What if the man who once made millions of hearts swoon left behind just 5 words that could break yours? David Cassidy, the teen idol who lit up the 70s, spent his final moments not in the spotlight, but in silence, confronting a truth so raw, it's changing lives even now. His last message wasn't just to his daughter, it was to all of us. Why did he say, "so much wasted time"? And what did he really mean? Stick around, because once you hear the truth, you'll never forget it. The final hours of David Cassidy's life weren't just somber, they were haunting, echoing with the fragile voice of a man who once lit up the world with a smile and a song. In a Florida hospital room surrounded by machines and memories, the former teen idol whispered a sentence that would ripple through generations of fans. It was more than just a farewell. It was a confession, a reflection, a legacy. And it wasn't until after his death that the world fully understood the depth behind those parting words. At the peak of his fame in the 1970s, David Cassidy wasn't just a celebrity. He was a movement. Girls screamed his name across continents. His face was a staple in bedrooms, plastered across posters, calendars, and cassette covers. As Keith Partridge in The Partridge Family, he wasn't just playing a character, he was embodying the fantasy of millions. Albums flew off shelves, concerts sold out in minutes. His fan base wasn't just big, it dwarfed the likes of Elvis and the Beatles. But behind all that glitter, Cassidy was struggling to breathe beneath the weight of his own spotlight. Fame had him cornered. The world knew the image, bright-eyed, golden-haired, always smiling. But that image betrayed the man beneath it. In quiet interviews and raw sound bites, Cassidy hinted at something darker. "I felt like I was drowning in success," he once said. The very thing that gave him adoration also took away his peace. He was a prisoner in his own fame, hounded by fans, tracked by cameras, and caged by expectations. A London show once had to be cancelled after a fan tragically lost their life in the chaos, a moment that deeply rattled him and permanently scarred his view of stardom. Behind the scenes, Cassidy was chasing something real, something beyond the spotlight. Though adored by millions, he often felt unseen. His charm masked fragility. His humor deflected pain. Even those closest to him described a man of contrast, dazzling on stage, yet emotionally isolated when the curtains closed. Cassidy's long battle with addiction wasn't just public, it was deeply personal. He sought relief, not just from the physical tolls, but from the aching void that fame could never fill. Despite rehab attempts and open admissions, the shadows lingered. Cassidy craved more than applause. He wanted connection, with his children, with his inner circle, with himself. But the lifestyle kept him distant. He tried to reinvent, tried to break free from the teen idol mold. In one of his most memorable moments, he stripped down for Rolling Stone, figuratively and literally, in a revealing 1972 feature that tried to say, "I'm more than Keith Partridge." But the world wouldn't let go. The years that followed brought more struggles. Cassidy's financial world crumbled. Casual drinking became a dependency. DUIs mounted. By 2015, bankruptcy was unavoidable. Public perception shifted. Once idolized, he now became a cautionary tale. A story whispered with sympathy and sadness. The crowds were gone. The headlines grew colder, but the real storm was only just beginning. In February 2017, the public saw something they couldn't unsee. A video surfaced from a California concert. Cassidy was slurring, forgetting lyrics, fumbling through the performance. Fans were stunned. He soon announced he was battling dementia, the same illness that had taken his mother. It made sense. His erratic behavior, the memory lapses, the confusion. Sympathy poured in. But the truth was far more devastating. Months later, Cassidy dropped a revelation that shocked even those closest to him. In an unseen documentary filmed during his final year, he made a painful admission. "I didn't have dementia. I was still drinking. I just couldn't face it anymore." The words hit like a storm. For years, Cassidy had covered his reality with a lie he thought was easier to accept. It wasn't a neurological decline. It was alcohol. A lifetime of pain, masked and numbed until it all came crashing down. Doctors later confirmed what Cassidy already knew: his organs were shutting down. Liver disease had ravaged his body. He was in and out of hospitals, fading slowly, quietly. Still, the public knew little. The showman's mask was still on. Until November 2017. Days before Thanksgiving, Cassidy collapsed at home. He was rushed to a Fort Lauderdale hospital, barely clinging to life. His liver and kidneys were failing. A transplant was no longer an option. His body was too far gone. In those final moments, Cassidy found clarity. Nurses recalled his calm demeanor. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was present. Sedated but aware, he received visits from those who mattered most. Family, friends, people who'd walked beside him in silence while the world watched from a distance. Some came for peace. Others came for goodbye. And amidst the machines and quiet beeping, Cassidy whispered a final sentence that would carry the weight of his entire story. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a lament. It was a reflection. A truth wrapped in sorrow and acceptance. And it shook the hearts of those who heard it. Because in that last breath, the world saw David Cassidy. Not the poster, not the icon, but the man. A man who had once been on top of the world, and who left it with a whisper that still echoes today. 4 quiet words, barely a whisper, would come to echo through generations and reignite a storm of emotions that Hollywood hadn't seen in years. They weren't uttered on a red carpet or through a press release. No, these words came softly, in the sterile hush of a hospital room on a November night in 2017. David Cassidy, once the golden boy of a generation, fading now under the weight of a long, exhausting battle, turned to his daughter and said what he perhaps had never said quite clearly before. "I'm proud of you." And just a breath later, with his voice trailing into memory, came the haunting coda. So much wasted time. These words didn't stay confined to that hospital. Katie Cassidy, David's daughter, a rising actress with her own legacy, carried them into the world just days later in a tweet that stopped thousands in their tracks. "My dad's last words to me were, 'I'm proud of you,'" she shared, words drenched in emotion. "I'll cherish them forever." It was like peeling back the curtain on decades of distance, disappointment, and longing. And suddenly, everything that once felt tabloid and chaotic found clarity in that one final moment. Was this peace? Or just a quiet cry for what might have been? For fans who had grown up with Cassidy, his posters on their childhood walls, his songs the backdrop of their teenage summers, this moment hit hard. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a collective pause. People started asking themselves, what had David really meant? Was this closure? A final attempt to reach across the emotional divide of a fractured family? Or simply the unfiltered truth of a man staring down the final curtain? Experts in end-of-life psychology often note that our last words are rarely scripted. They tend to reveal what lingers when all the noise fades. For David, a man who spent his life trying to be seen through a million flashing bulbs and screaming fans, those words stripped away the spectacle. They weren't lyrics or a PR move. They were real, raw, honest, and perhaps, finally, enough. Back in that hospital room, the atmosphere was a mix of quiet heartbreak and uneasy calm. David's body was losing the battle. His liver, his kidneys, everything weakening under years of internal war. And yet, even as his physical strength ebbed, moments of lucidity broke through. He requested old Partridge Family songs, tunes from the days when his face was printed on lunchboxes, and millions knew his name. Staff said he smiled faintly when reminded of fans who still wrote letters. In those moments, he wasn't a man crumbling beneath regret. He was remembering the applause, the love, the fleeting magic of youth. The medical prognosis had been stark. No transplant window left. Time was no longer negotiable. And yet the final hours weren't about statistics. They were about emotion. Family gathered. Katie, his son Beau, close friends. Hands were held. Eyes met in silence. Words were said, and some were not. In one tender exchange, Cassidy turned to Katie, his voice barely audible, and gave her what she would later call the most precious gift. "I'm proud of you." That phrase, so simple yet weighted, felt like the epilogue to a life story lived in chaos and longing. Cassidy didn't just say it to Katie. He said it to every part of his past he couldn't fix, every missed birthday, every unreturned call. Some believe it was his way of making peace, however late, and finally finding grace amid the wreckage. Katie's bond with her father had never been simple. Their relationship, if it could even be called that for most of her youth, was like a bridge half-built, suspended between two different worlds. She grew up largely without him. Hollywood often pretends absence can be masked by fame, but real life doesn't work that way. Still, Katie had built her own career, her own identity, far from her father's spotlight. And yet when he passed, it wasn't the headlines she clung to. It was that moment, those 4 words. In the days following his death, Katie didn't speak loudly. She didn't need to. The emotion in her voice during interviews, in quiet online posts, said it all. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making peace with it. And in 2025, on what would have been David's 75th birthday, she did just that. Even after being displaced from her Pacific Palisades home due to a devastating natural disaster, she found a quiet space, lit a candle, and whispered her tribute to the man who had finally spoken the words she needed to hear. "I think about those final words often," she admitted, a soft truth floating amid the noise. That act, simple, unannounced, spoke volumes. It reminded us that healing doesn't need fanfare. Sometimes it happens in silence, in the flicker of a candle, in memories that won't let go. Katie's journey wasn't about glamorizing grief or rewriting history. It was about accepting what was, and finding love in the shadows of what could never be fully repaired. David Cassidy's legacy has often been told through platinum records and screaming fans. But the real story, the one that lingers, lies in the quiet fall of his final days. The sparkle of fame may fade, but the echo of his humanity has only grown louder. Because in the end, he wasn't just a pop icon. He was a man who longed to be forgiven, to be remembered not just for who he was on stage, but for the father he wished he could have been. And for Katie, and for many watching from afar, that simple phrase, "I'm proud of you," was more powerful than any song he ever sang. He once sang, "I Think I Love You," an anthem of innocence, youth, and the thrill of falling head over heels. But years later, David Cassidy's final words were no chart-topping lyrics. They were stripped of melody and drenched in reflection. "I'm proud of you." That tender sentence, directed at his daughter, reverberated far beyond a father's love. It cracked open the facade of a once glittering life, exposing a truth few were ready to face. Cassidy's voice, once the heartbeat of teenage adoration, ended with a whisper that shook millions awake. That's when fans realized, behind every spotlight is a man fighting shadows we never see. It's hard to comprehend how someone who seemed to have it all, fame, fans, and a place in pop culture history, could be drowning in silence. Cassidy admitted late in life that success wasn't the cure. It was a mask. "Fame lifts you up, but it can also cut deep," he confessed, years after the applause began to fade. The crowd loved the image of him, but very few knew the man himself, and perhaps that's what hurts the most. As Cassidy's health declined, so did the carefully polished version of himself. No longer the teen idol, just a man reckoning with regrets and time lost. That phrase, "so much wasted time," landed like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a lament, it was a universal gut punch. How many of us have put off saying, "I'm sorry"? How often have we swallowed our truth, thinking tomorrow will offer another chance? Cassidy's last breath wasn't merely a goodbye. It was a challenge to everyone still breathing. The phrase spread like wildfire, igniting self-reflection across social media and dinner tables. A daughter holding her father's hand one last time. A fan finally calling their estranged parent. It wasn't fame that stirred these moments. It was Cassidy's broken humanity. There's a reason his final words struck such a deep chord. Cassidy had spent decades performing for the world, perfecting the image of a lovable star. But when the stage went dark and the curtain fell, the only audience left was himself. And that's when the truth surfaced. It's the haunting realization that no amount of applause can replace a single moment of honest connection. He once had the world at his feet, yet in the quiet of a hospital room, he mourned the conversations never had and the love he let slip by. That's not just a celebrity story. That's our story. As fans scrolled through tribute posts, the magnitude of his legacy shifted. It was no longer about gold records or magazine covers, it became about what he taught us in his final act. Cassidy didn't leave with a bang. There was no Hollywood finale, just the soft exhale of a man finally telling the truth. And for those willing to listen, it was life-changing. His death wasn't merely an ending, it was a mirror, one that asked, "Are you living your life or just performing it?" Financially, Cassidy's life mirrored that duality too. At his peak, he was pulling in millions, with packed stadiums and global tours. He indulged in a luxury lifestyle that few could rival. His passing reminded us that moments are the true currency of life. Not awards, not acclaim, but time spent, time shared, and time never to return. One by one, stories began surfacing. A fan who'd lost touch with their sister picked up the phone. A father who never said, "I love you," finally did. A woman who shelved her dream to be an artist started painting again. All because of 7 simple words. So much wasted time. It was a sorrowful gift wrapped in honesty. His daughter later said, "He would have wanted this." And she was right. Cassidy didn't just want fans, he wanted to matter. And perhaps that's the greatest irony. The teen idol who once feared irrelevance, in the end, gave the world a message that may outlast his entire career. In a world obsessed with doing more, Cassidy urged us to feel more, to show up, to speak up, to love without delay. His final breath wasn't a curtain call. It was a beginning for everyone who was listening. And now, that message lingers. Whispered between friends, written in journal entries, posted in comments like this one. "Thank you, David, for reminding me to live." As the screen fades and silence returns, Cassidy's voice echoes in the quiet. Not with a song, but with a question. What will you do with the time you have left? Wow, what a journey. From the glittering heights of stardom to the quiet honesty of his final hours, David Cassidy's story isn't just about fame, it's about being human. He gave us unforgettable songs, wild stage moments, and those classic teen idol smiles. But in the end, it was his raw, unfiltered truth that truly hit home. So much wasted time. 5 words that stopped millions in their tracks. And maybe, just maybe, made us all pause to rethink how we're spending ours. We saw a man who once had it all, adoration, wealth, and endless applause, finally strip it all back to what mattered most. Family, time, connection. He didn't just leave behind chart toppers and magazine covers. He left behind a life lesson disguised as a whisper. A reminder to say what needs to be said. Chase the dreams that scare us, and stop putting off joy for someday. If that hit you in the heart even a little, Do us a favor. Go ahead and hit that like button. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of David's story stuck with you the most. Have you ever had a so much wasted time moment in your life? We'd love to hear it. And hey, if you're new here, don't be shy. Subscribe to join our community of nostalgic storytellers, celebrity deep divers, and emotional truth seekers. Next up, we're diving into another icon's untold final chapter, one with a twist you won't believe. So make sure to turn on that notification bell so you don't miss it. And remember, David Cassidy may have been a heartthrob, but his real legacy? Teaching us to stop waiting. Because life doesn't give encores. Thanks for watching, and until next time, don't waste a second. The stage is yours.